I declare open the special meeting of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People in observance of the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people and in accordance with the provisions of GA Assembly Resolution 32/40B of December 2nd, 1977. It is my honor and pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Philemon Yang, President of the General Assembly, Her Excellency Mrs. Barbara Woodward, President of the Security Council, Mrs. Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, representing the Secretary General, and His Excellency Mr. Riyad Mansour, Permanent Observer of the State of Palestine to the United Nations, representing the President of the State of Palestine, His Excellency Mr. Mahmoud Abbas. I wish also to welcome esteemed delegations, intergovernmental organizations, and civil society organizations for their participation in this special meeting. Our special appreciation goes also to Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan, who is joining us today as a civil society representative. Please note that this meeting is being webcast live on UNWeb TV with simultaneous interpretations in all 6 official languages. I would also like to urge all speakers to keep their statements within 5 minutes. Allow me to inform you that some of the dignitaries might have to leave the meeting at the end of the first segment due to other commitments. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me at this point to make a statement on behalf of the committee. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, today we once more gather to observe the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, not as a mere commemoration, but as a solemn reminder of unfulfilled promises, denied rights, and the historic injustice endured by the Palestinian people for decades. 76 years after the adoption of the GA Resolution 181 Roman II, which envisioned 2 states living side by side in peace and security, the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people remain unrealized, including their right to self-determination, a right owed to all peoples on earth. This year's commemoration takes place amid unprecedented suffering and tragedy. Now stretching beyond 400 days, Israel's military action on the Gaza Strip has inflicted devastating human and material losses. Over 44,000 Palestinians have been killed, 70% of whom are women and children. More than 104,000 have been injured, many disabled for life, and thousands more are still missing, believed to still be buried under the rubble. The entire Palestinian civilian population in Gaza is enduring a humanitarian catastrophe of a level unseen since the Second World War. A relentless blockade, compounded by devastating military assaults by Israel, the occupying power, have left families without food, water, electricity, or essential supplies, and without shelter. Gaza has been made inhabitable by design, with homes, schools, hospitals, and 80% of civilian infrastructure lying in ruins, and the basic necessities of life have been weaponized by Israel, including starvation as a method of war. In the words of UNRWA Commissioner General Lazzarini, Gaza has been turned into a place where, I quote, "The smell of death is everywhere as bodies are left lying on the roads and under the rubble," end quote. As the Secretary General has lamented, Gaza has become hell on earth, the most dangerous place in the world to be a child, the most dangerous place for humanitarians and all of the civilians who call Gaza home. We must now act decisively to end this humanitarian, political, legal, and moral catastrophe. The scale of catastrophe and severity of the crimes have led numerous scholars, independent scholars, experts, human rights organizations, to recognize this grave situation as constituting genocide. The International Court of Justice is now addressing the case and has 3 provisional measures to protect the Palestinian people from irreparable harm. At the same time, in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, Israeli settler violence against Palestinians and their properties continues to escalate, with impunity fostering a climate of lawlessness, leading to rising casualties and forced displacement of entire Palestinian communities. Israel's settlement expansion and creeping annexation of Palestinian lands, now openly threatened by Israeli government ministers, undermines both the prospects for peace and the viability of a future Palestinian state. These actions, deemed illegal under international law and reaffirmed this year by the International Court of Justice, continue unchecked, underscoring the profound cost of global inaction. We must also act to end this injustice. The grim reality which we are facing day in, day out, forces us to confront a fundamental truth. Palestinians deserve dignity, respect, and the same inalienable rights afforded to all people. Dehumanizing rhetoric and calls for their annihilation or to obliterate their identity or right to exist as a nation are not only a stain on the perpetrators, but a stain on our humanity. The United Nations Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People unequivocally condemns and demands an end to all of the atrocities being perpetrated by Israel, the occupying power in the OPT, including East Jerusalem. We urgently call on the international community to take decisive action to end Israel's occupation, to ensure accountability for perpetrators, deliver justice for the victims, and uphold the long overdue inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. This includes addressing the rights of Palestinian refugees, achieving the independence of the state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, with full recognition of Palestine as a sovereign state equal among nations. To continue to deny these rights to the Palestinian people is to betray the principles of humanity and justice we claim to uphold. Distinguished delegates, the failure of the international system to act decisively in the face of such grave breaches of international law, and particularly the inability of the Security Council to uphold its charter duties and to enforce its legally binding resolutions, have severely compounded this conflict and deepened the suffering of the Palestinian people. This unacceptable failure and abdication of responsibility reflect not only just an institutional paralysis, and threaten the credibility of our organization, but also a glaring moral deficit. This inaction and the impunity granted to Israel's violations have emboldened its disregard of international humanitarian law, leaving the Palestinian people defenseless in the face of relentless aggression and defying the very principles of the UN Charter. We are encouraged by the action of the ICC with the decision to issue arrest warrants for the perpetration of war crimes and crimes against humanity, restoring a loss of trust in the rule of law. We urge all member states to do their part to ensure accountability as demanded by international law, as determined by the ICJ, and as set out in the provisions of General Assembly Resolution ES10/24 for bringing an end to all violations and an end to this illegal occupation in its entirety. Today, UNRWA, the lifeline for millions of Palestinian refugees and UN-mandated agency, is also under attack, politically, financially, and rhetorically. These efforts to undermine and effectively eliminate the agency and obstruct its operation in the OPT, including East Jerusalem, are unlawful and will cause further suffering to millions of Palestinians and threaten regional stability and the prospects for peace. As the occupying power, Israel has no legal authority to terminate UNRWA's mandate. Its attempts to restrict or ban UN operations in the OPT represent a direct challenge to the authority and privileges and immunities of the United Nations, Israel's obligations under the Fourth Geneva Convention. These actions also contravene the collective will of the international community, reflected in the mandate by the GA in 1949 to create UNRWA, a mandate that has consistently reaffirmed which has been consistently reaffirmed with overwhelming support from member states. Distinguished delegates, despite these dire circumstances, there are reasons for hope. The General Assembly's adoption of Resolution ES10/24 of 18 September 2024, which seeks to implement the International Court of Justice's advisory opinion on the illegality of the Israeli occupation and the requirement to end it, is a significant step forward. This resolution reminds member states of the international legal obligations to address this illegal situation, including provisions for concrete action to be taken by member states to uphold the obligations, including halting arms transfer to Israel and an end to all dealings with its settlement enterprise. The lessons of history are clear. The global solidarity that ended apartheid in South Africa and Namibia demonstrates that collective will can achieve change. All member states must apply the same resolve to end the Israeli occupation and secure justice for the Palestinian people. Neutrality in the face of injustice is complicity. In the work of our committee, we take comfort in the words of former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon that echoed today. I quote, "No occupation that oppresses a people can last forever," end quote. We therefore appeal to the Security Council and to all member states to fulfill their responsibilities by urgently considering actions needed to swiftly end Israel's illegal occupation of the Palestinian territory, foremost through the implementation of its numerous resolutions, and to assist the Palestinian people to realize their right to self-determination and freedom, a solemn obligation on all of us. Today, we must resolve that this day will not merely commemorate unfulfilled rights, but serve as the turning point for action. We call on all member states to unite, to unite in pursuing a just and lasting solution to the question of Palestine. The path forward is clear: prevent annexation and end the illegal occupation of the Palestinian territory in its entirety, halt all violence, both the relentless military assault in Gaza and the escalating settler aggression in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and uphold international law with accountability. Humanitarian lifelines like UNRWA must be protected, and Gaza's reconstruction must be prioritized under Palestinian leadership. Our actions must restart towards achieving the two-state solution based on UN resolutions and on the pre-1967 borders, with the realization of the independence of the state of Palestine, with East Jerusalem as its capital. The time for action is now. Justice for the Palestinian people can no longer wait. The world is watching, and history will judge us not by our words, but by our actions. Let us act with urgency, courage, and determination to fulfill the vision of two states, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace, security, and mutual recognition. I thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I now have the honor of giving the floor to the President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Mr. Philemon Yang. You have the floor, sir.
Good morning. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. Seeking peace for everyone in the Middle East is why we are here today. For peace has long eluded the people of this region, who continue to be burdened by conflict and violence. Nowhere is this clearer than in Palestine, where people desperately yearn for peace as they endure prolonged suffering. Let me be clear. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict can neither be resolved through force from either side, nor through endless occupation or annexation. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict will only end when both Israelis and Palestinians are able to live side by side in their own sovereign independent states in peace, security, and dignity. This is why we are here today, to reiterate the importance of realizing the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, in particular the right to self-determination, and to express our collective solidarity with this cause. Today we also recall the General Assembly's historic adoption of Resolution 181-2 on 29 November 1947. This so-called partition resolution called for the establishment of two states, a Jewish state called Israel, which exists, and an Arab state called Palestine, which still has not been admitted to the United Nations as a full member 77 years later. It is unjust. Moreover, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains unresolved despite numerous resolutions and international conferences aimed at achieving a just, comprehensive, and lasting peace. The conflict has once again only escalated in front of our eyes, becoming one of the worst humanitarian crises in recent memory. In Gaza, more than 43,000 people have been killed since October 2023, most of them civilians, women, and children. More than 100,000 people have been injured. 1.9 million people, nearly the entire population of Gaza, have been displaced. Civilian infrastructure lies in ruins. Meanwhile, the situation in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, remains deeply concerning. Israel's large-scale military operations, violence against civilians, settler-related violence, settlement expansion, demolitions, and displacement continue to undermine the prospects for an urgently needed political process. Excellencies, over 7 decades ago, this Assembly called for a two-state solution. Today we gather to stress again that the aspiration of the Palestinian people for their own state is a just aspiration, one that will help realize their hopes for peace, security, and dignity, and one that must finally be met. When generations of young Palestinians are being deprived of their fundamental rights and are left without hope for a better future, it only fuels desperation, trauma, and extremism. We must restore hope and trust among Palestinians. Hope that a better future is possible, and trust in the United Nations and its commitments. We can start building that future here today by demanding a ceasefire, an immediate return of the hostages, and the commencement of negotiations towards a long-lasting peace. The future requires that the international community finally takes concrete and meaningful action towards a just, comprehensive, and lasting resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a solution that is anchored in international law, the Charter of the United Nations, and relevant United Nations resolutions. I am not saying anything new by affirming that only dialogue and negotiations towards a two-state solution will bring about an end to the vicious cycle of violence and instability. And today I would like to reiterate that only the establishment of a Palestinian state alongside the State of Israel can guarantee lasting peace, security, and prosperity for the peoples of Palestine and Israel. Let us act now. I call on all the parties concerned and states that have influence in the region to work towards this end without further delay. Let us translate our solidarity with the Palestinian people into action that transforms their lives today. Let us do so for the sake of Palestinian children and for a peaceful, prosperous, and equitable future for everyone. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Philemon Yang for his statement. Our committee is thankful for your stewardship of the Assembly in addressing the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory. I now have the honor of giving the floor to Her Excellency Barbara Woodward, Permanent Representative of the United Kingdom to the United Nations in her capacity as President of the Security Council. Have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Excellencies, colleagues. I would like to thank the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of Palestinian People for inviting me to address this meeting in my capacity as President of the Security Council. The Council remains fully committed to pursuing a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in the Middle East, in line with international law, in particular with the United Nations Charter, international human rights law, and international humanitarian law, and consistent with its relevant resolutions, which represent a cornerstone of the peace and security in the region. It is clearer than ever that a just, lasting, and comprehensive solution in accordance with international law and the relevant UN resolutions, to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict can only be achieved by peaceful means. Israel's military operation in Gaza, where 101 hostages are still being held by Hamas, continues. The immense suffering of the Palestinian people and of the hostages endures. The international community needs to redouble efforts to support a ceasefire, release of all hostages, and take urgent action to address the catastrophic humanitarian crisis, and to chart an irreversible pathway towards the realization of the two-state solution. During the past year, the Security Council has remained seized of the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian question. The Council has continued to receive monthly briefings from the Secretary-General's Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, and from the Secretary-General himself, and to hold open debates on a quarterly basis, also receiving briefings and updates on the situation from UN officials and agencies and other international organizations on the ground. The Council has continued to receive the Secretary-General's reports on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2334 of 2016 in briefings by the Special Coordinator every 3 months, as well as in written form every 6 months. The Council convened additional meetings and closed consultations in response to extremely serious and worrying developments on the ground, including the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza. Chair, since last November, the Council has adopted 4 resolutions and several press statements in response to the crisis. On the 22nd of December 2023, the Council adopted SCR 2720. The resolution reaffirmed the obligations of the parties to the conflict under international humanitarian law regarding the provision of humanitarian assistance and called for the creation of conditions for a sustainable cessation of hostilities. The resolution also requested the Secretary-General appoint a senior humanitarian and reconstruction coordinator with responsibility for facilitating, coordinating, monitoring, and verifying in Gaza, as appropriate, all humanitarian relief consignments to Gaza, and further requested that the coordinator expeditiously establish a UN mechanism for accelerating the provision of humanitarian relief consignments to Gaza through states which are not party to the conflict. It also demanded the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. It further rejected forced displacement of the civilian population, including children, in violation of international law. On the 25th of March 2024, the Council adopted SCR 2728, which demanded an immediate ceasefire for the month of Ramadan, leading to a lasting, sustainable ceasefire, and also demanded the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, and for all parties to comply with their obligations under international law in relation to all persons they detain. On the 10th of June 2024, the Council adopted SCR 2735, which welcomed the ceasefire proposal announced on May 31st and urged both parties to fully implement its terms without delay and without condition. The resolution set out that implementation of the proposal would enable a ceasefire in 3 phases, with release of hostages alongside other provisions on exchange of Palestinian prisoners, the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, the return of Palestinian civilians to their homes, and the safe and effective distribution of humanitarian assistance at scale throughout the Gaza Strip, as well as a permanent end to hostilities. The resolution also rejected any attempt at demographic or territorial change in the Gaza Strip, including any actions that reduce the territory of Gaza, and reiterated the Council's unwavering commitment to the vision of the two-state solution, where 2 democratic states, Israel and Palestine, live side by side in peace with secure and recognized borders, consistent with international law and relevant UN resolutions. And in this regard, stressed the importance of unifying the Gaza Strip with the West Bank under the Palestinian Authority. The members of the Security Council also recognize the essential role that UNRWA plays in providing life-saving humanitarian support and provision of services in the OPTs and in the region. No organization can replace or substitute UNRWA's capacity and mandate to serve Palestinian refugees and civilians in urgent need. Council members are therefore gravely concerned over legislation adopted by the Israeli Knesset and have strongly warned against any attempts to dismantle or diminish UNRWA's operation and mandate. Council members have also urged the Israeli government to abide by its international obligations and respect the privileges and immunities of UNRWA. The members of the Council also welcome the Secretary-General's and UNRWA's commitment to fully implement the recommendations of the independent review of mechanisms and procedures to ensure adherence by UNRWA to the humanitarian principle of neutrality, led by Ms. Catherine Colonna. Chairman, over the last year, violence in the West Bank has reached unprecedented levels. Council members call for an immediate end to actions which undermine the trust between the parties and threaten the viability of the two-state solution. This includes settlement activity, from construction, demolition and confiscation of Palestinian property, to evictions of Palestinians and settler attacks across the occupied Palestinian territory, to incitement to violence. The members of the Council also continued to carefully monitor the acute fiscal and financial situation faced by the Palestinian Authority and encouraged actions to bolster its capacity to assume governance responsibilities in Gaza. The members of the Council also condemn violence and any indiscriminate attacks against civilians, both Israeli and Palestinian, and stress the importance of ensuring protection of civilians. Chairman, the status quo is not sustainable. We must not give up efforts to achieve an immediate ceasefire and release of all hostages, and to ensure the safe, unimpeded, urgent delivery of humanitarian assistance to the Palestinian civilian population in Gaza to alleviate the catastrophic humanitarian situation. We reiterate our unwavering commitment to the two-state solution and underline the need to put in place urgent steps to revitalize a political pathway towards its realization. The Security Council will continue to follow closely the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian question, to pursue the implementation of its relevant resolutions, and to foster and support efforts towards an environment conducive to achieving peace, prosperity, and security for both Israeli and Palestinian people. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank Her Excellency Mrs. Barbara Woodward, President of the Security Council, for all the initiatives she has taken on the question of Palestine under the presidency of the United Kingdom, and for her important position at the recent Security Council resolution on Gaza. The committee highly appreciates your country's long-standing support to the realization of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. I thank you. I now have the distinct honor to give the floor to Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed on behalf of the Secretary General. You have the floor.
Thank you. His Excellency Mr. Sheikh Niang, Chair of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, President of the General Assembly, President of the Security Council, His Excellency Mr. Riyad Mansour, Permanent Observer of the State of Palestine, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to deliver the Secretary General's message. Every year on this day, the international community stands in solidarity for the dignity, rights, justice, and self-determination of the Palestinian people. This year's commemoration is especially painful as those fundamental goals are as distant as they have ever been. Nothing justifies the 7th of October terror attacks by Hamas and the taking of hostages, and nothing justifies the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. Yet more than a year later, Gaza is in ruins. More than 44,000 Palestinians, mostly women and children, have been reportedly killed, and the humanitarian crisis is getting worse by the day. This is appalling, and it is inexcusable. Meanwhile, in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, Israeli military operations, settlement expansion, evictions, demolitions, settler violence, and threats of annexation are inflicting further pain and injustice. It is time for an immediate ceasefire and the unconditional release of all hostages, an end to the unlawful occupation of the Palestinian territory, as confirmed by the International Court of Justice and the General Assembly, and irreversible progress towards a two-state solution in line with international law and relevant UN resolutions, with Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security, and Jerusalem as the capital of both states. As a matter of urgency, I appeal for the full support of the life-saving humanitarian relief for the Palestinian people, in particular through the work of UNRWA, which represents an irreplaceable lifeline for millions of Palestinians. The United Nations will continue to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people and their inalienable rights to live in peace, security, and dignity. Thank you.
I would like to thank most warmly the Deputy Secretary General for her truly inspiring and important statement, very concise statement, which depicts very vividly the tragic situation prevailing in the OPT, and reminding us also of our responsibility to fulfill the promises contained in all the engagements made by the international community through the UN to assist and help the Palestinian people to realize its aspirations and legitimate rights. Thank you once again. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Riyad Mansour, Permanent Observer of the State of Palestine, to the United Nations, who will read out a message from His Excellency Mr. Mahmoud Abbas, President of the State of Palestine. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you very much, Brother Sheikh Niang, Chairman of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. and I have the honor and privilege of reading the statement of His Excellency President Mahmoud Abbas to this meeting on the occasion of the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. معالي السيد
Your Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations.
Welcome my sister Amina Muhammad, representing the Secretary General. She is the Deputy Secretary General. سعادة السيد فيليمون يانغ.
Your Excellency, Mr. Philemon Yang, President of the General Assembly. His Excellency, Her Excellency, Ms. Barbara Woodward, President of the Security Council. His Excellency, Mr. Sheikh Niang, Chair of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we commemorate the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, at a time that our people have endured over 400 days of an ongoing genocidal war, which has led to more than 150,000 casualties, the majority of them being children, women, and the elderly, killed and maimed by the Israeli occupying forces, who are deliberately and systematically targeting civilians in a repetition of what happened in the Nakba of 1948 and the tragedy of 1967, aimed at displacing our people and seizing their land and the resources. An urgent international intervention is needed to stop this tragedy that is taking place before the eyes and ears of the world. The international community has declared this International Day in support of the rights of our people, foremost their right to self-determination and the independence of their state, which necessitates taking practical and dramatic steps to confront the dangers that are threatening millions of lives and the possibility of achieving a just and comprehensive peace based on international legitimacy and the Arab Peace Initiative. It is now apparent to the entire world that the main reason for the lack of security and stability in the Middle East is the existence of this illegal occupation, which must be removed from the territory of the State of Palestine to ensure the realization of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, particularly the right to self-determination, and to achieve a just and agreed-upon solution to the Palestine refugees question in accordance with Resolution 194. Ladies and gentlemen, disregarding the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people over the past 76 years, and treating the occupying power as a state above international law, shielding it from accountability, thus providing it with impunity for its crimes, and even providing it with financial and military support, has emboldened it to defy international legitimacy and international law, and to persist in its aggression at every level. As a consequence, it has declared its rejection of the existence of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, established by the General Assembly, going so far as to consider it a terrorist organization. It also rejected the decisions of international courts and the most recent advisory opinion issued by the International Court of Justice on the cessation of the aggression and ending the illegal occupation, as well as the court's binding provisional measures, orders, and the arrest warrants issued by the ICC. It has even formally announced its readiness to implement the racial annexation and settlement expansion schemes, in addition to other illegal Israeli policies and practices, including ongoing invasions of cities in the West Bank, killing and arresting innocent people, demolishing their homes, confiscating their land, building illegal settlements, and taking other unilateral steps aimed at consolidating the occupation and ensuring its continuation. All of this has caused significant harm to the international law-based multilateral system and to its credibility, which has been shaken by the inability to stop the aggression, despite images of massacred children that have shocked humanity. The latest of which was the biased use of the veto at the UN Security Council to prevent a comprehensive and permanent ceasefire and thus allow the aggression against our people to carry on. Until when the world will remain silent, unable to deter the occupying power from its crimes, hold it accountable, and compel it to abide by international law like the rest of the countries of the world. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a few days ago, we commemorated the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, which was a most significant step reflecting our adherence to international legitimacy and international law, in which we affirmed our respect for UN resolutions in relation to the two-state solution as a way to achieve a just and comprehensive peace. The Palestine Liberation Organization, the sole legitimate representative of our Palestinian people and the umbrella of all Palestinians, has embodied the hopes and aspirations of our people for freedom and independence, stressing the need to eliminate the occupation from the entire Palestinian territory occupied in 1967 and to resist it through all political, legal, and diplomatic means and by peaceful, non-violent popular resistance. It has also stressed that no matter what the occupation does, it will not succeed in breaking the steadfastness of our people and their attachment to their land and their rights, always supported by the solidarity of the peoples of the world, who will not allow the occupation's plans to liquidate the just cause of Palestine and to obliterate the legitimate rights of our people, and will not allow the occupation to implement its annexation plans, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and other policies that violate international legitimacy and international law. We stress the importance of taking practical steps to deter the occupation, including by suspending Israel's membership in the United Nations due to its refusal to abide by international law and its obligations, and due to its insistence on completing its crimes against the Palestinian people. Such steps are required to restore confidence in the ability of the international system to hold accountable those who violate international agreements and international law and compel them to fulfill their obligations. We have consistently stressed that the only way to halt the dangerous escalation we are witnessing in the region and maintain regional and international stability, security, and peace is to resolve the question of Palestine on the basis of international legitimacy resolutions and to immediately begin implementing Security Council Resolution 2735 to ensure the provision of humanitarian assistance to the entire Gaza Strip, as well as Israel's full withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, the assumption of the State of Palestine's sovereign responsibilities, and the return of the displaced persons to their homes in preparation for the reconstruction of what has been destroyed by the occupation. At the same time, it is imperative to reject Israel's plans to separate Gaza from the West Bank, including Jerusalem, to diminish the State of Palestine's responsibility for it, to stop the settlements, end the occupation, the killings, the settler terrorism, the attacks on the holy sites, and to stop attempts to alter the legal status quo and historical realities in the Holy City, as well as to stop the raids on cities, the extrajudicial killings, arbitrary arrests, and attacks on prisoners, as well as withholding the bodies of martyrs and plundering the Palestinian people's money and resources. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, despite all the difficulties we are facing today, we believe that no matter how brutal and horrific the occupation is, it will come to an end. We will continue to work to attain the rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination and freedom and independence on their land, the land of their ancestors, and to realize the independence of their state with East Jerusalem as its capital. We are all confident that the peoples of the world will continue to stand by what is right, what is just, and freedom for Palestine and its people, and that they will continue to work towards stopping the aggression, the war, the killing, the destruction, and displacement. Here, allow me, in my name and on behalf of the Palestinian people, to express appreciation to all the peoples of the world who have stood up and are still standing up to speak out against injustice and aggression, demanding an end to this illegal and abhorrent occupation that has tarnished the face of history with blood, murder, and deprivation of rights, freedom, and independence of an entire people, demanding also an end to the genocide of our steadfast people in the Gaza Strip. They have affirmed that these dangerous circumstances require transforming these courageous positions into actions through the positions of their governments and parliaments to support the steadfastness of our people on their land and maintain their hope for a firm international consensus to achieve peace and stability in accordance with international law. This includes recognition of the State of Palestine, obtaining full membership of the UN. Here, we must also commend the great efforts being made by the Global Alliance, which held its first meeting in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia with broad participation from brothers and friends to implement this goal that we collectively seek to achieve. Finally, I would like on this day to salute the resilience of our Palestinian people in Palestine and in the refugee camps and in the diaspora, and with pride and honor, I salute our brave martyrs, prisoners, and wounded people. And I tell them all, our unified goal is to end this illegal occupation and to achieve freedom and independence. Once again, I reiterate that the occupation will end and Palestinian rights will prevail, no matter how long it takes. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you.
The statement of His Excellency President Mahmoud Abbas. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Minister Mansour, I thank you in expressing once again the full support of the committee to the legitimate your quest for to recover your legitimate rights. I would like to ask you to convey our sincere gratitude and our appreciation to His Excellency Mr. Mahmoud Abbas, President of the State of Palestine, for this particularly important message. We are now concluding the first part of our meeting. I would like to thank His Excellency, the President of the General Assembly, Her Excellency, the President of the Security Council, and the Deputy Secretary General for their statements and expressions of solidarity with the Palestinian people. We will now have a short break to allow the distinguished guests to leave the room. Merci beaucoup. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now move to the second part of our meeting. I would like to welcome the intergovernmental organizations that have supported the Palestinian cause and over the years and participated in this special meeting to express their solidarity. Next, representatives of this organization will sit at the podium and will deliver statements on behalf of the organizations. I would now like to give the floor to Mr. Salem Matoug, Chargé d'Affaires AI of the Permanent Observer Mission of the African Union, reading out a message from His Excellency Mr. Moussa Faki Mahamat, Chair of the African Union Commission. You have the floor, sir.
Let me start by thanking you, Mr. Chair, and members of the Bureau for the excellent work the committee is doing. And also, I have the honor to deliver the following message on behalf of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Moussa Faki Mahamat, and I quote, "On behalf of all African people, the African Union Commission, and my own personal behalf, I send you warm greetings and strong solidarity sentiments on the International Solidarity Day with the Palestinian people. Today is not only an International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, but it is also a day to reiterate our commitment as an international community to support the Palestinian cause. More than 13 months have passed since Israel started its brutal attacks against the Palestinian people in Gaza. More than 45,000 people have been killed and hundreds of thousands injured, which has led to an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe and a dangerous escalation in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. The deterioration in the region has caused and is causing unspeakable horror, tremendous human loss and suffering. This threatening not only the Middle East, but world peace and security. The cost of civilian population is unbearable and unacceptable for the human conscience. As members of the international community, we cannot remain idle towards such dangers, atrocities, and suffering. We have a duty towards maintaining international peace and security and protecting the people of the region, as well as humanity, from the risks and brutality of war. We must act to ensure accountability with full respect to international law, taking into account the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice of the 19th of July 2024 and the General Assembly resolution of the 18th of September 2024 that seeks to implement the Court's advisory opinion. Mr. Chair, the African Union Commission continues to call on the international community to assume its responsibilities concerning the question of Palestine and the implementation of all United Nations resolutions adopted from 1948 to date, aiming at reaching a peaceful solution. The African support to the Palestinian cause is premised on the values of freedom, justice, and humanitarian principles that Africa defends in international fora alongside all those striving to ensure the Palestinian regains their right to exist and also Palestine to regain its right to exist as a key viable state in the Middle East. The African Union Commission has consistently expressed deep concerns at the consequences of unilateral policies and actions, including the ongoing war in Gaza. The war in Gaza is unjustifiable and is contributing to a devastating humanitarian situation, which is a war and a war against humanity. Also, the city of East Jerusalem and the holy sites have never been as dangerous as they are now. Christians and Muslims are fundamentally deprived from practicing their faith and beliefs. Mr. Chair, we call for an immediate ceasefire and the implementation of United Nations Security Council resolution in this regard, as well as the UN General Assembly resolution, which calls for an immediate humanitarian truce and cessations of hostilities against the civilian population in Gaza. On the other hand, we call for the release of all Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails and detention centers, and we call also for the release of Israeli hostages in Gaza. Today, more than ever before, there is a need for urgent and renewed efforts to find a lasting solution to the conflict based on the coexistence of two states, Israel and Palestine, within the framework of all relevant United Nations resolutions. Mr. Chair, we express our deep concern at the adoption of two laws by the Israeli parliament to ban UNRWA in defense of international law, and which, if implemented, would prevent the UN humanitarian assistance to Palestinian people under Israeli occupation, and already under an unprecedented and continued physical attack at the past year. We welcome the decision of the Assembly to convene during its session, 79th session, an international conference for the implementation of United Nations resolutions related to the question of Palestine and the two-state solution. The current situation calls for taking urgent measures to end the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land. And we call for stopping the wars and come to negotiations table in good faith. This is the only way to guarantee the fulfillment of the legitimate aspiration of the Palestinians and Israeli peoples, and to achieve peaceful coexistence, security and prosperity, and to ensure a better future for all the people in the Middle East and beyond. The current situation calls for urgent action towards ending the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian land. The African Union Commission reiterates its commitment to support all efforts aimed at achieving a final solution for the Palestinian-Israeli conflict based on the international legitimacy, and reject any incomplete and fragmental solutions such as temporary borders or Jewishness of Israel. The African Union Commission will work tirelessly with other international actors to ensure the establishment of an independent Palestinian state on the borders of June 1967 with East Jerusalem as its capital, and the realization of the inalienable right of the Palestinian people, including the right to self-determination in accordance with the international law and the relevant United Nations resolutions. End of quote. I thank you for your kind attention. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank Mr. Salem Matuk for delivering this principled statement of the chair of the AU Commission, and we are appreciative of the African Union's continued support to the question of Palestine. Thank you. I now have the pleasure of giving the floor to Mrs. Nasria Elarja Fliti, Chargée d'Affaires AI of the Permanent Observer Mission of the Arab League to the United Nations, who will be reading out a message from His Excellency Mr. Ahmed Abul Gait, Secretary General of the Arab League. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Excellency, Ambassador Shekyang, Permanent Representative of Senegal and President of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, Dr. Riyad Mansour, Permanent Representative of the State of Palestine, and soon the Permanent Representative of the State of Palestine, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Our observance today of the International Day of the Solidarity with the Palestinian, with the proud Palestinian people who continue to fight for their deprived, denied rights and for the independence of their usurped right of Palestine, the land of monotheistic religions. On this occasion, please allow me to read a statement by the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, Ambassador Ahmad Abu Al-Ghayb. And I quote, "Ladies and gentlemen, our observance today of the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people comes at solemn and bitter times, as the question of Palestine endures extremely difficult historical circumstances. Today, after the masks have fallen off and the hideous Israeli plot has been exposed, it's clear that the aim of the right-wing gang in Israel is to end Palestinian presence on the Palestinian homeland, liquidate the Palestinian state project, and turn the dreams of forced displacement into reality by making Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, unlivable for Palestinians and making their survival unbearable, or one that cannot be achieved on the ground. Powerlessness and silence facing this plot that has been exposed in full view of the world amount to no less than complicity in this historic crime. Inaction and negligence only contribute to this situation that can only be described as shameful. We do not mean by this the people of principles in the four corners of the world who have stood up against this crime of the century. They are a living testament that our humanity lives on, that there are those who still call a spade a spade. Gaza is undergoing ethnic cleansing and a genocidal war against humanity, whose only aim is to entrench the Israeli occupation and extend the despicable apartheid regime from the river to the sea. We pay tribute to the countries and people of principles and conscience who stood up against this mighty power. We pay tribute to the countries that recognized the state of Palestine, aware as they are that peace and stability will not prevail in the region without an independent Palestinian state along the 4 June 1967 borders with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. We call on all countries to follow suit and, in so doing, implement the two-state solution and give hope to the Palestinians at these dark times. We welcome the important decisions taken by some countries to end arms exports to Israel and impose sanctions on settlement activity and settlers. We reaffirm that accountability for the crimes of the occupation is the only means to end the occupation and undermine its basis. We commend the bold action of the ICC that issued arrest warrants against occupation leaders over their war crimes and crimes against humanity. This is an important step towards accountability and justice, the two pillars of sustainable peace. While we welcome these measures, they do not suffice to achieve the objective of ending the aggression and the genocide against the Palestinian people. Ladies and gentlemen, This is the moment of truth after over 400 days of indiscriminate killing, destruction, and systematic genocide. The advisory opinion of the ICJ of 19 July 2024 confirmed that the Israeli occupation of the territory of Palestine since 1967 is unlawful and must be brought to an end as rapidly as possible. The GA then adopted a resolution in support of the advisory opinion and calling for its implementation. All countries of the world must now end the occupation and must not cooperate in any manner with the continuation of the occupation of the historic land of Palestine. Countries must choose if they want to stand on the right or wrong side of history. The truth is crystal clear. The truth is that the continuation of the Israeli occupation weakens trust in the global order. This occupation, with its inhumane practices, ongoing violation of international law and international humanitarian law, and public disregard of the United Nations and its most senior representative, will bring about the collapse of this very international system. The Arab Summit in Jeddah, held earlier this month, adopted important decisions and called inter alia for mobilizing international support to suspend Israel's participation in the General Assembly of the UN. This is plausible as the occupation poses a threat to international peace and security and breaches the conditions of Israel's admission to the UN more than 75 years ago. We have all witnessed the legally invalid and morally bankrupt decisions, including recently the Knesset decision prohibiting UNRWA and its activities inside the OPT. This comes at a time when UNRWA represents a lifeline for millions of Palestinians in its 5 areas of operations, and while the people of Gaza are on the brink of slow death induced by famine that continues to date. In conclusion, I pay tribute to the people of Palestine, their ongoing struggle and steadfastness facing the Israeli machinery of oppression, injustice, and tyranny. We extend our appreciation to all free countries and peoples that stood up for the just question of Palestine. Global solidarity demonstrated by the people of conscience in the global South and North reflects commitment to human values and international principles that uphold the right of peoples to freedom and independence. This solidarity also shows that the global conscience continues to embrace justice and human rights. This ongoing show of solidarity will undoubtedly instill hope in the Palestinian people and bring us closer to the desired peace, a peace rooted in justice and right, not force and tyranny. May God's peace and blessings be upon you. End of quote. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Mrs. Nasria Elarja Fliti for the important statement on behalf of the Arab League. And we appreciate the active and crucial role the Arab League is playing in its unwavering commitment to resolve the question of Palestine. I now have the pleasure of giving the floor to His Excellency Mr. Duncan Lucky Muhumusa, the DPR of the mission of Uganda, who will be reading out a statement of His Excellency Mr. Adonia Yebare, PR of the Republic of Uganda to the United Nations, on behalf of the movement of the non-aligned countries. You have the floor, sir.
President, I'm honored to speak on behalf of the 121 member states of the Non-Aligned Movement, NAM. The Non-Aligned Movement, NAM, affirms its long-standing, common, and principled position on the question of Palestine, which has lasted for over the past 7 decades. It is in the spirit of NAM, it is in this spirit that NAM stands with the community of nations to commemorate the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. This day reminds us all of the ongoing quest for justice, peace, and the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. The movement expresses concern that we mark this day amidst the heightened tensions in the Middle East with a devastating war in the region. NAM reiterates that respect for the UN Charter, international law, and UN resolutions constitute the foundation for a just solution of the Palestinian question, as a cornerstone for regional and global peace and security in the Middle East. The peaceful solution to the question of Palestine is central in establishing wider peace and stability in the Middle East and is an issue of wider concern for the international community as a whole and for global peace and security. Mr. President, NAM condemns in the strongest terms all forms of violence, particularly Israeli military attacks and Israeli collective punishment against the Palestinian people as a grave breach of international law, including humanitarian and human rights law, including, inter alia, the killing and injury of tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians, many of whom are women, humanitarian workers, and journalists. NAM demands an immediate and complete cessation of all forms of hostilities, violent repression, illegal Israeli policies and practices against Palestinian people and other nations in the region. The non-aligned movement demands an immediate and permanent ceasefire in accordance with the relevant UN Security Council and General Assembly resolutions, including Resolution 2735 of 2024, which has called for, inter alia, the release of hostages, the exchange of Palestinian prisoners, the return of Palestinian civilians to their homes and neighborhoods in all areas of Gaza, and the safe and effective distribution of sufficient humanitarian assistance throughout the Gaza Strip to all Palestinian civilians who need it, including medical needs. NAM members also expressed concern at the reports of forced starvation and forced displacement of the civilian population throughout Gaza. NAM expresses support for all the diplomatic efforts to reach an agreement for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. NAM recalls Security Council Resolution 2334 of 2016, which provides for a viable path to peace, setting forth the essential requirements and parameters for the realization of a just outcome on the basis of the two-state solution based on the June 4th, 1967 lines, and ensuring the fulfillment by the Palestinian people of their inalienable rights, including to self-determination and the independence of the State of Palestine, with East Jerusalem as its capital, and a just solution for the plight of the Palestinian refugees. NAM reiterates the call for full respect for the historic and legal status quo for the historical Hashemite custodianship over the Christian and Muslim holy sites in the city, and for the protection of the sanctity of the holy sites, and for all relevant provisions of international law and Security Council resolutions. Action must be taken immediately to help de-escalate the volatile situation that must include a halt to all unilateral and unlawful measures by Israel, the occupying power, in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, in order to lay foundations for any prospects for peace. NAM commends the efforts of His Majesty King Mohammed the sixth as co-chair of Al-Quds Committee of the Organization of the Islamic Cooperation. Mr. President, NAM calls for the continued provision of the needed humanitarian and socio-economic assistance to the Palestinian people, including the Palestine refugees. The movement reaffirms the continued indispensability of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, along with other United Nations agencies and international organizations in alleviating their plight and safeguarding their rights, and urges the international community to provide the agency with sufficient and predictable funding. Furthermore, NAM rejects the provocative and dangerous attacks by Israel against the personnel, premises, and mandate of UNRWA, and calls for an immediate halt to such unprecedented assaults on a United Nations humanitarian agency and on the United Nations as a whole, in direct violation of the Charter, numerous international conventions, including the 1946 Convention on Privileges and Immunities of the United Nations and relevant resolutions. The movement reiterates grave concern regarding the lack of accountability for all violations committed by Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem. Israel must comply with international law and must be held to account for its blatant breaches of its international legal obligations. NAM member states therefore continue to call for international action to ensure a cessation of hostilities, the protection of civilians, and accountability for the violation of international law. NAM reiterates that dialogue, diplomacy, and respect for the principles of international law are the cornerstones in advancing peace in the Middle East. We encourage all parties to seek political processes with a commitment to justice, equality, and mutual respect. To conclude, Mr. President, on this day of solidarity, NAM stands with the Palestinian people in their quest for dignity, freedom, and peace. NAM member states reaffirm their commitment to bring an end to this grave and historic injustice by promoting a just, lasting, comprehensive, and peaceful solution to the question of Palestine in accordance with international law and the relevant United Nations resolutions. NAM reaffirms its support for the Palestinian people in their struggle to achieve justice and fulfill their inalienable rights and legitimate national aspirations, including to self-determination, freedom, and independence in their sovereign and independent state of Palestine, with East Jerusalem as its capital. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Duncan Muhumuza for reading out this important message of the chair of NAM, and we are once again very grateful for being a strong ally to the committee to advance the cause of the Palestinian people. I thank you. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Hamid Opelo Yeru, permanent observer of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, who will be reading out a message from His Excellency Mr. Hussein Ibrahim Taha, Secretary General of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, thank you for convening this meeting. I have the distinct honor and privilege to deliver the message of His Excellency Hussein Ibrahim Taha, Secretary General of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. So the message is as follows. His Excellency Ambassador Sheikh Nian, Chair of the Committee of the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, allow me to express the appreciation of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to the United Nations and its various committees and bodies, especially the United Nations Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, its chair, Ambassador Sheikh Nia, and its distinguished members for their efforts to support the cause of Palestine and enhance international solidarity with the Palestinian people. As we come together here on this International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, we are deeply aware of the dire and dangerous conditions unfolding in the occupied Palestinian territory, particularly the Gaza Strip, where military aggression, genocide, starvation, siege, forced displacement, ethnic cleansing, indiscriminate destruction, and terrorism perpetrated by the Israeli occupation forces have continued to cause widespread suffering, dire humanitarian disaster, and instability. These harsh realities, marked by violence and displacement, constitute a flagrant violation of international law and relevant United Nations resolution. It is within this context that we stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine and join in the global call towards addressing the grave challenges posed by these unending atrocities of the Israeli occupation forces. To this end, the OIC has been unwavering in affirming its principled position, the latest of which was expressed in the resolution issued by the extraordinary Arab and Islamic Summit held in Riyadh on November 11, 2024. This resolution outrightly condemned the continued Israeli aggression in Palestine and Lebanon, which threatens security and stability in the entire region. It also renewed its call to the international community, especially the United Nations Security Council, to assume its responsibilities to put an immediate end to the ongoing aggression which constitutes war crime and crime against humanity. It also called for an urgent delivery of humanitarian aid and basic needs to the Gaza Strip, including ensuring international protection for the Palestinian people. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, these unfortunate developments in Gaza cannot be viewed in isolation from the organized terrorism and severe attacks committed by extremist settlers under the protection of the Israeli occupation forces in the West Bank, including the city of Al-Quds. Undoubtedly, these actions fall within the legal Israeli measures to change the demographic composition of the occupied Palestinian territory, even as they seek to obliterate the Arab and Islamic identities of Al-Quds Sharif. Accordingly, we reaffirm that the illegal Israeli colonial occupation has no sovereignty over the city of Al-Quds and its holy cities and its holy sites, as they remain an integral part of the Palestinian territory occupied in 1967 and the capital of the state of Palestine. While we warn against attempts of the Israeli occupation authorities and extremist settlers group to undermine the historical and legal reality of Islamic sites, especially the blessed Al-Aqsa Mosque, we affirm that this action constitutes an attack on the established religious rights of Muslims around the world and represents a violation of freedom of worship and the sanctity of holy places. Consequently, these illegal actions are capable of fueling extremism, violence, and racism, and will endanger security and stability in the region and indeed in the world at large. In the same vein, we follow with great concern the recent desperate measures taken by the Israeli occupation authorities against UNRWA, which is the United Nations agency entrusted over the years with the vital role of providing essential humanitarian and social services to the Palestinian refugees. Without doubt, UNRWA's activities remain a testament of the international community's commitment and responsibility towards the cause of regional peace and stability in the region. On this occasion, we emphasized the need for the international community to stand by UNRWA and support it politically and financially. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the OIC believes that a more credible and definitive solution of this lingering crisis requires a paradigm shift on the part of the international community. There is need to transform its political will into practical and effective measures. This is to ensure that the Israeli occupation power discharges its obligations and duties in accordance with the relevant international resolutions, including an end to the illegal occupation of Palestine and its illegal settlements. It also behoves the international community to provide international protection for the Palestinian people, expand recognition of the State of Palestine and its right to full membership of the United Nations, and implement the two-state solution. In conclusion, the OIC renews its firm and absolute support for the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people, including the establishment of an independent State of Palestine on the 1967 borders, with East Al-Quds as its capital, based on relevant UN resolutions, especially the recent General Assembly resolution on the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice and the Arab Peace Initiative. I thank you. End of quote. Thank you, Excellency.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Hamid Opeloyeru for his statement. I would like to express the sincere appreciation of the committee for his important message and for the OIC's strong support for and partnership in our committee's activities. Thank you. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Peter Mohan Maithri Pieris, Chair of the Special Committee to investigate Israeli practices affecting the human rights of the Palestinian people and other Arabs of the occupied territories, and permanent representative of Sri Lanka to the United Nations. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. Excellencies, distinguished representatives, on the solemn occasion of the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, I thank you for the opportunity to deliver this statement in my capacity as the Chair of the Special Committee to investigate Israeli practices affecting the human rights of the Palestinian people and other Arabs of the occupied territories. Chair, when we met last year, the situation in both the Gaza and the West Bank was deeply distressing. The situation today is even worse. The escalating violence, immense loss of civilian lives, and destruction persists unabated. The humanitarian crisis, particularly in Gaza, where people continue to be deprived of basic resources, including food and nutrition, has reached catastrophic levels. Chair, amidst the unfolding catastrophe, the majority of the international community assert the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and continue to emphasize the need for a ceasefire and the provision of humanitarian relief, as well as adherence to international law. However, 76 years after the adoption of the General Assembly Resolution 181, within brackets 2, envisioning a two-state solution, these hopes remain unfulfilled. The situation today is dire, with death, destruction, mass displacement, and regional destabilization with possible global ramifications. The International Court of Justice is examining allegations of violations of international law that may constitute great crimes against humanity. Chair, on the 18th of November, I presented the 56th report of the Special Committee. This report of the Special Committee investigating Israeli practices affecting the human rights of the Palestinians highlights a dire situation, particularly in Gaza. The report emphasized that the current circumstances represents a regression to unchecked violence and persecution, undermining international law and causing immense suffering. The findings reveal that Israel's military operations have caused catastrophic damage to essential services, leading to long-term health risks and environmental disasters. The report critiques Israel's use of artificial intelligence in military targeting, which has resulted in high civilian casualties, particularly amongst women and children. It also addresses issues of sexual violence against Palestinian women and the deliberate targeting of civilians. Chair, moreover, the report discusses the suppression of media and dissent, contributing to a narrative that obscures the realities in Gaza and the West Bank, where similar alarming trends are occurring. The report calls for immediate action to halt support for Israel's actions, emphasizing the need for accountability from member states to uphold international law and protect Palestinian rights. Chair, the urgency of the situation is underscored, warning that inaction will have lasting consequences for global peace and security. Chair, it was in 1977 that the General Assembly adopted Resolution 32/40B, declaring 29th November as the International Day for Solidarity with the Palestinian people. However, 47 years later, we are still grappling with a situation where peace and peaceful coexistence between the states of Israel and Palestine seem as illusory as ever. We reiterate our commitment to a just, lasting, comprehensive, and peaceful solution to the question of Palestine, based on the Palestinian people's right to self-determination, including the right to an independent state, based on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. Chair, let us remember that our response to this issue, or the lack of it, will determine the moral and ethical foundation of our international system. In conclusion, I reaffirm our unwavering solidarity with the Palestinian people during these challenging times and our steadfast support for their pursuit of statehood. I thank you, Chair.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Peter Mohan Methri Paris for the very important message on behalf of the Special Committee, as well as for your country's active participation in our committee's activities. Senegal, I am a member, like my brother, Ambassador Ahmed Faisal from Malaysia, of this committee. Therefore, from my vantage point of being a member, I can give here testimony on your leadership and on your commitment to fully deliver the mission entrusted to the committee. As you are about to end your tenure here in New York, I would like to really thank you for your engagement. Thank you for the passion you have given to this mission, and wishing you all the best in the future. I now have the pleasure of giving the floor to Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan. Before she takes the floor, I would like to make a quick introduction. Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan is a pediatric intensive care physician who had received her medical degree from Oxford University Medical School. She has worked in the occupied West Bank and Gaza, inter alia, with the organization Doctors Without Borders. Since the outbreak of the Gaza war, she has been to Gaza a number of times with the organization Medical Aid for Palestinians UK, and has also co-founded the social media account at Gaza Medic Voices, which shares first-hand accounts from healthcare professionals in Gaza. Dr. Haj Hassan is one of the voices from the field, bringing the stories of medical professionals and their patients to the outside world. She has been featured in many news outlets. Dr. Tanya Hassan, I have the pleasure to give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. So as His Excellency mentioned, I'm a pediatric intensive care doctor and have worked in Gaza many times over the past decade. Most recently, as part of an emergency medical team working in a hospital in Gaza's middle area during the ongoing genocide. I'm here today in the moral company of every other health professional that I know who has worked in Gaza over the last 14 months, some of whom are with me here today in this room. We're here in solidarity with our Palestinian healthcare workers and with the Palestinian people. You cannot witness what is happening in Gaza and not emerge enraged and determined to stop it. We don't want to be here or on the news repeatedly providing moral witness to ongoing atrocities. But by design, international journalists and independent human rights and forensic investigators have been prohibited by Israel from bearing witness. At the same time, incredible Palestinian journalists covering the genocide of their own people have been repeatedly targeted by Israel and discredited, while both their reporting and their murders have been largely ignored by mainstream Western media. As one of the few international observers allowed into Gaza, I can tell you, spend just 5 minutes in a hospital there and it will become painfully clear that Palestinians are being intentionally massacred, starved, and stripped of everything needed to sustain human life. Collectively, for the past 14 months, we have treated people subjected to civilian massacre after civilian massacre at the few remaining partially functioning hospitals in Gaza. Entire families have been eliminated, wiped off of the civil registry. Our healthcare and humanitarian colleagues are being killed in record numbers. We have treated countless children who lost their entire families, a phenomenon so frequent in Gaza that it's been given a specific name: wounded child, no surviving family. We held the hands of children as they took their last breaths, with no one but a stranger to comfort them. Those who recovered enough to leave the hospital continued to face the obvious risk of death, be it through another bombing, starvation, dehydration, or disease. History has clearly shown us that doctors can't stop genocide. This is why it's called the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. And this is why I, as a doctor, am here today, pleading to you. Before I share what I bore witness to, I want to share a quote from my colleague, Dr. Mohammed Ghanem, a young ER doctor who was killed 1 month ago by a quadcopter drone after steadfastly caring for his patients for over 400 days, while the hospitals in which he was working were repeatedly besieged. Dr. Ghanem said, "As much as I could, I stayed away from sharing the tragic stories for 2 reasons. The first reason is that I know it is of no use, for those who couldn't be moved by pictures of dismembered and charred corpses will not be moved by some words. And the second reason is that I can't find the words to describe the stories." I share Dr. Ghanem's sentiment. What is left to say that might move people to action? What is left? How can we even begin to articulate what we have seen? I remember the silence of the woman brought into the hospital injured, staring blankly and unable to speak. She had given birth 1 week earlier. She couldn't find her 7-day-old baby. Both her baby and her toddler were trapped under the rubble. There are no words that can adequately convey the pain and depravity of this aggression. There are no words. I remember 6-year-old Siwar, who was intubated in the ICU with severe traumatic brain injury. Her little brother still missing. I recall her mother sitting next to her, tears streaming down her face, asking what was her crime. I didn't have the heart to tell her that Siwar, with her beautiful, long, dark lashes and curls, would likely never talk or interact fully, if she were to survive. Or 5-year-old Muhammad with an in-and-out penetrating injury to the head, likely a gunshot. Sorry. Try to... Sorry, I have a nosebleed. I don't know if someone can grab me a tissue. It would be really helpful. But I'll continue, as our Palestinian colleagues have for over 400 days. Or 5-year-old Muhammad with an in-and-out penetrating injury to the head, likely a gunshot, who died in the ER as there were no beds in the ICU. He had no known surviving, He had no known surviving family to retrieve his body and was taken to the morgue by the medical team. I remember Muhammad so well. His hands and feet were really small. The last expression on his face was one of pain. Or the elderly woman whose age I did not learn, shot multiple times by the Israeli military while she was on the beach. She died while her elderly husband held her hand, tearfully telling me, "We only have God." Or 13-year-old Amir, who sustained severe neck trauma after his home was bombed and kept calling for his sister. He didn't recognize that she was the girl in the bed next to him because she had been burned beyond recognition. When she died, Ahmed was left as the only surviving member of his family. I recall his vacant stare and his soft voice whispering into my ear, "I wish I had died with them. Everyone I love is in heaven. I don't want to be here anymore." How do you find the words to describe Amir's story? Or toddler cousins, Muhammad and Masa, who we resuscitated on the same bed after the residential building was bombed. I recall undoing their diapers, desperately looking for blood vessels to give them intravenous fluids. Muhammad bled to death. Masa suffered severe brain injury. She was still in a coma when I left Gaza. Both her parents were injured in the same attack. I don't know if they survived. Or Shuruq, 15-year-old girl with head and chest injuries, whose eyes were severely burned. She kept calling for her mother, who she couldn't see was right next to her and also severely injured. Her mother gasped desperately for air until she died. We, the medical team, knew before Shuruq did that she was the only surviving member of her family. Shuruq, whose name means sunrise. How do you even begin to find words to tell these stories? Or the father frantically searching for his children in the ER, who found us resuscitating them on the floor. All of his children except Abdullah, who he never found. Or the lovely older gentleman who helped carry the injured into the emergency department, comforting them in any way he could, cleaning the pools of blood after every mass casualty. I saw him daily and had assumed he was a hospital employee, only to later learn that he had started volunteering at the hospital after his entire family had been killed at the beginning of the genocide. He had found that the only way he could cope with having survived was by helping other families. How does one begin to find words to describe his story? These are not exceptional stories. Every single person I met in Gaza has lost family, has lost friends, colleagues, neighbors, violently taken from them. I speak of the patients with traumatic injuries who I cared for in just 14 days. But this is only one dimension of this apocalyptic situation. Everything needed to sustain life is under attack in Gaza and has been for some time. Water, food, shelter, education, healthcare, energy, sewage, sanitation. A child who was living in an apartment and going to school in Gaza 14 months ago, if alive today, is now attempting to survive Israeli airstrikes, warships, gunfire, hunger, starvation, a lack of clean water, the spread of diseases that threaten their little immunocompromised bodies. No safe shelter and no prospects for education today or in the future. Every university in Gaza has been destroyed. The only 2 medical schools in Gaza where I used to teach have been destroyed. Every child in Gaza is living this horror. I constantly think of these children. I hope children that I personally met, and I hope they are alive, surrounded by parents who are also still alive, that they're not maimed, not hungry, not thirsty, not sick, not cold as the winter encroaches on their tents, and not scared. At the same time, I know that that's an impossible reality for any child in Gaza today. On the eve of World Children's Day last week, the United States vetoed for the 5th time a UN Security Council calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. In the words of the Palestinian ambassador to the UN, Majid Bamia, there is no justification for vetoing a resolution trying to stop atrocities. There is no justification. I want you to take a second and imagine all of the children that I just spoke about, their mothers, their fathers, desperately seeking medical care and searching for hope in one of the few remaining hospitals in Gaza. Then the electricity cuts out. The entrance to the hospital is struck by a missile. The hospital is threatened with forced displacement orders again. It's apocalyptic. That same hospital where I witnessed each of those horrific tragedies has been targeted multiple times over the past 14 months, as has virtually every single hospital in Gaza. Hospitals and healthcare workers have been systematically targeted by the Israeli military from the very first day. Our colleagues and friends have been killed, maimed, unlawfully detained, and tortured. I have personally met healthcare workers who describe physical, psychological, and sexual torture by Israeli military and Israeli prison guards. One of my most dedicated nursing colleagues, Saeed, had been abducted while evacuating from Al-Shifa Hospital after an Israeli forced displacement order. He was detained for 53 days and described the most horrific forms of torture. After his release, he suffered from severe insomnia, and yet he attended the ER every single day to care for his patients. He fell asleep one day holding the small body of a fatally injured infant who had died during an attempted resuscitation from exhaustion. Dr. Ghanem, who I quoted before, wrote in April, 6 months before he was killed, I quote, Al-Shifa Hospital was under siege while I was inside it 3 times, and I was forcefully removed from it twice. This time, it was the most severe, both in terms of the siege, the incursion, and the amount of destruction. We were 13 doctors in the emergency department. All of us were tortured to different degrees, and six doctors were injured or arrested. I am only talking about the department I was in charge of. I am not talking about the doctors who were executed directly from other apartments after they were arrested, or the doctors whose fate is still unknown. End quote. Over 1,000 healthcare workers have been killed in Gaza. Hundreds of healthcare workers have been held in Israeli captivity. At least 4 have been killed while in detention. Their bodies are still being held. Every single healthcare worker I met in Gaza has lost family, has lost friends, has lost colleagues. Every single healthcare worker I met has been displaced multiple times, has been forced out of the hospitals where they work. Many healthcare workers have been killed while trying to rescue the wounded in what has infamously been called Israel's double or triple strike attacks, where a location is struck, and then shortly after, it is struck a second and third time once the rescue workers are there to retrieve the casualties. Other healthcare workers have been killed while working in hospitals. Hospitals and healthcare workers represent life and the will to keep people alive. The systematic and egregious targeting of healthcare is a line that should have never been crossed, like so many red lines. What happens now that all of these lines have been crossed? What sort of world have we descended into? It's actually a world we've allowed to persist and build up to for decades. These profound injustices did not start 14 months ago. Palestinians have attempted every single means, including diplomacy and peaceful protest, and appealing to the very reason this establishment was created. Their efforts have been met with the complete disregard of UN resolutions and the deepening violation of their human rights. I remember one Friday in 2019 at Al-Shifa Hospital, during the Great March of Return, the peaceful protests that lasted for 2 years at the border wall, which killed about 223 Palestinians. 223 Palestinians were shot and killed by Israeli forces during those protests. Al-Shifa Hospital is the same hospital that has now been almost entirely destroyed, where doctors have dug mass graves to bury the dead, where the brilliant doctor Adnan al-Bursh led the orthopedic department before he was abducted, tortured, and likely raped to death. I vividly recall one day in 2019 in that hospital, an adolescent boy who was just brought in from the protest after being shot in the neck by Israeli soldiers from one of the towers. He was awake, but gagging on his breathing tube and unable to move any of his body below his neck. His spinal cord had been severed by the bullet. He would never be able to move his arms, his legs, or likely even breathe on his own. His father pleaded with the medical team and kept asking, what did we do other than peacefully demand for our rights? In the words of our dear friend, Dr. Khamis al-Assi, a pain and rehabilitation doctor who to this day is besieged in Gaza, he said, we have been abandoned. We've been sacrificed for the cause we wanted to protect for everyone, but we are the only people who are paying that price, unfortunately. By everyone, Dr. Khamis means each and every one of us here together in this room and the world over. Knowing I would be here today, I asked some colleagues in Gaza if they had messages they wanted me to share with you today. I'd like to share some of them. Tell them we are tired. We are without homes, on the streets, our loved ones are gone, and we are all stories. This was a message from a young ER nurse. She's still trapped. An intensive care doctor besieged in Gaza and separated from his family told me, tell them everything you came and saw with your eyes. Tell them that I want to see my son and my wife because I really miss them. Saeed, the nurse I spoke to earlier who was detained and tortured, says to you, we are being buried. Every minute we are being buried. Every minute we disappear. Every minute we're abducted. We're experiencing things that the mind cannot even comprehend. We die and don't find anyone to bury us. I'm asking you to share my story, my whole story, with my name. I want the whole world to know that I'm a human being. Sorry. This has gone on for too long. I want the whole world to know that I'm a human being. At the end, I am not pen on paper. I'm not anonymous. I'm a human being created by God. He then asks a question that I'm going to pose to you. Why aren't Palestinians the ones speaking for our cause? Why are we not there and able to speak? The Palestinian people, the people in Gaza. Why not me? Why not my neighbor? Why not my colleague? Our Palestinian colleagues are not here today because the systems we currently exist in don't recognize the value of Palestinian life. I'm going to end by some reflections from myself and my colleagues who recently came back from Gaza. I'm speaking to you today both as a member of civil society and as a healthcare worker who has witnessed firsthand the death and destruction inflicted upon the Palestinian people. We spent the last 14 months watching as the most live-streamed and documented genocide in history has been met with silence, widespread propaganda campaigns justifying the unjustifiable, silencing and discrediting those who have attempted to expose it. The eyewitnesses that have made it out alive consistently reported crimes that in any other context would have led to sanctions. But here, after 14 months of the most grave breaches of humanitarian law, gross violations of human rights, barbaric war crimes, it is met with impotence by individuals, countries, and the very institution represented by this building. One day, someone will dig up the records of our testimonies, pleading for 14 months. They will dig up the records of Palestinians covering their own genocide when international journalists were unprecedentedly banned from entering. Palestinian children setting up press conferences to tell the world that their lives mattered. We will have to reckon with that history. The precedent that's been set in Gaza, as some of my colleagues here have mentioned earlier, it's going to spread everywhere throughout the world. It signals the demise of rule of law. We've already seen it spread to Lebanon, and as one volunteer surgeon said, when I was in Gaza, I felt like it was a prelude to the end of humanity. If solidarity with your fellow humans is not enough of a reason to act, think about how this is going to spill over. This should be frightening for everyone. I recognize that the words I shared with you today are heavy. But these words pale in comparison to the reality experienced by Palestinians for over 400 days and 76 years before that. Palestinians don't need our pity. They don't need our praise. They need our meaningful and truthful solidarity. And there is no time for despair. In the 24 hours that I'm going to spend in this city, at least 60 children in Gaza will be injured or killed. I recognize that many of you here, by virtue of being here today, are already convinced of the need to act. It takes courage to fight a corrupted system, a system that gives disproportionate to countries with terrible records of global violence. Today, as all of us sit here in the comfort of safety, Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya is in Kamal Adwan Hospital, just discharged from the intensive care unit after he was injured by an Israeli strike. His son was killed not long ago. His 2 daughters are injured. And yet he continues steadfastly to provide care for his patients. He said a few days ago, we will continue to provide this service at any cost to ourselves. The courage and action by Palestinian healthcare workers in the face of this genocide presents an exemplary model for all of us. The question I want to last leave you with is, what are we risking? Thank you.
I thank Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan for her very powerful statement. Your very moving, documented account of the shattered lives of innocent children reveals truly the profound inhumanity of the oppressors. We all know that. It also reveals the failure of the international community and of this very UN to live up to their responsibilities. So thank you for reminding us all that. I think our moral conscience is really questioned, and I am lost for words to say that we really need to do more than just having empty words and take actions. We don't have any other route to take. And allow me to take this opportunity to thank, through you also, all civil society organizations and individuals active on the question of Palestine throughout the world for the invaluable work in support of and in solidarity with the people of the Palestinian people. The committee vows working with Palestinian civil society organizations to fulfill the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. So Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan, once again, thank you so very much. Thank you for your engagement, your commitment, and we share all the concerns. We share also the frustrations, and we also share your conviction that we need to do something very concrete. Thank you once again. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is now my honor to announce that our committee has received messages of support and solidarity from many heads of state and government, from ministers for foreign affairs, governments and organizations throughout the world. I would like to read out the list of officials who sent them in the order in which they were received. I will start with the messages received from heads of state: Jordan, the Lao People's Democratic Republic, the Philippines, Algeria, Venezuela, Tunisia, China, Turkey, Colombia, Brunei Darussalam, Kuwait, Vietnam, Qatar, Senegal, Morocco, Maldives, Indonesia, United Arab Emirates. That's 4 heads of state. The messages received from the following heads of governments are Lebanon, Pakistan, Malaysia, Malta. The committee has also received messages from the following ministers for foreign affairs: Bahrain, Syria, Guinea, Guyana, Saudi Arabia, Cuba. We also have received messages from the following governments: Iran, Nicaragua, Japan, Chile, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bangladesh, Egypt, Afghanistan, Iraq. I'm sure there will be messages arriving to the committee or the division, and they will be posted as they arrive on the website on the question of Palestine, maintained by the Division for Palestinian Rights, which is un.org/UNISPA. Before I close, I would like to give the floor to Minister Mansour of the State of Palestine. So if you want to make some final remarks, please go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want, on behalf of the Palestinian people and their leadership, to express our gratitude, first of all, to the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People for organizing this event this year, which is one of the most painful years in the history of the Palestinian people. There isn't much that one can say after the testimony, the passionate, the powerful statement of Dr. Tanya on behalf of those that she was asked to convey their messages to you and through you to the world. We hear you. We will not rest until we put an end to these atrocities in the Gaza Strip and to this genocide. We will not forget, we will not forgive, and we will go after those criminals who have caused this much suffering and pain to our people. The journey of the Palestinian people from the Nakba, before the Nakba and after the Nakba, was always a painful one, but we are resilient people, we are powerful people, we are creative people, we are educated people, we are determined people. We will never be defeated, we will never be broken. And I thank you so much for conveying synopsis of the reality of our people in the Gaza Strip, and I know the summation of that reality is 1,000,000 times more than what you tried to describe of it, but you did describe it so eloquently, so passionately, and so faithfully to what you have seen and the tremendous amount of pain that was displayed, and you saw it, and it was something that should be told by all those brave ones like you who had the opportunity to go and to tell the world the pain of our people, which I agree with you, and many told me that no matter what we say, we cannot reflect the atrocities and the pain that exist in the Gaza Strip. We also want to thank the division for playing a very important role, the Division on Palestinian Rights at the United Nations, and all those who are with us today, all of you, to express solidarity with the Palestinian people, and to the speakers who delivered statements on behalf of so many different organizations and groups. We, the Palestinian people, will never forget the heroic work of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. And you, Mr. Chairman, you, my twin brother, and the members of the Bureau and the members of the committee who have been working tirelessly in order to tell the story of the Palestinian people and, more importantly, to fight so hard for justice for the Palestinian people, to end this illegal occupation, to allow the Palestinian people to exercise self-determination, including the independence of our state, with Holy Jerusalem as its capital, and the rights of the refugees to return in accordance with international law and relevant UN resolutions. This time, this moment of solidarity with our people is unique, in which we need to double, triple, and to do more in order to stop this genocide against our people. If we succeed in ending this aggression against our people today, we save lives. Those that we lost, God bless them, bless their souls. We cannot bring them back to life. But we can save those who are alive. We need to save them. We need to stop this war. We need to stop this genocide. And we need to save our people, to attend to their wounds and to rebuild the beautiful Gaza Strip and to rebuild the entire nation of Palestine by getting rid of this occupation, evil occupation, illegal occupation, so that we can live in freedom and dignity in our own state, where we can run our own affairs and do everything as other nations are doing without interference from a very vicious occupation that denying us all rights. But we will never be broken, as I said, and we will stay the course, and we will put an end to this evil, illegal occupation, and we will enjoy our independence. Mr. Chairman, thank you again for this organizing this event and the efforts of the committee, and we will continue working with you until we accomplish the objectives bestowed upon the committee by the General Assembly to help the Palestinian people to attain their inalienable rights, including their right to self-determination, independence and statehood, and the right of the refugees. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Minister Mansour, and thank you for being an inspiration to the committee. And I would like also to say how much we appreciate the passion you are giving to the committee, your team at the mission and the state of Palestine. You are not alone in this fight, and the committee will do whatever it can to really play its part fully in order to render justice to the Palestinian people. Before concluding, I would like to indicate and to correct that the messages received by Egypt, Iraq, and Iran are from the heads of state. The message received from Bangladesh is from the head of government. So once again, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to the heads of state and government, ministers for foreign affairs that I have mentioned earlier, and to all participants for their persistent efforts aimed at achieving a comprehensive, just and lasting settlement of the question of Palestine, and for the support they have always given to the mandated activities of this committee. Before adjourning this special meeting, I wish to thank everyone who has made this meeting possible, in particular the staff from the Division for Palestinian Rights in the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, the Department of General Assembly and Conference Management, the Department of Public Information, the Office of Central Support Services, interpreters, and everyone who worked behind the scenes. In conclusion, let me remind that next week, the committee is launching an exhibit in connection with the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian People in the visitors' lobby of the GA Hall. Details on the opening of the exhibit will be shared very soon. On behalf of the committee, I look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you so very much. This meeting is adjourned.